Okay, good morning, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, and anyone who dares to spend time to watch my video about the Sabbath School lesson number 9 entitled From Contamination to Purification. And I would like to give my comment about this lesson. And I want you to pay a very serious attention for this. It is very important for you to start analyzing the prophecy of Daniel in Daniel 8. Okay, let us examine more closely the lesson themes as I'm going to share with you now. Let us start from the little horn. While in chapter 7, the little horns grows out of the fourth animal, which is the pagan Rome, the little horn of chapter 8 originates from one of the quadrants of the compass. Some commentators argue that this horn represents Antiochus IV as a Seleucid king, who came from one of the four divisions of the great Grecian Empire of Alexander and invaded Jerusalem. You know, Grecian Empire led by Alexander the Great. He conquered Media and Persia. He conquered larger region than the one conquered by Persia. And when he died, the all four general replaced him. Now, a close look at the biblical text, however, points to another referent, an interpretation that holds more validity for two main reasons. The first, we must note that some Bible translation convey the impression that the little horn comes from one of the four horns that succeeded the big horn of the Grecian goat. If so, that might fit with Antiochus the fourth. However, the Hebrew text indicates that the little horn comes from one of the quadrants of the compass. One of the quadrants means four individuals. The Hebrew text says like this: "Therefore the male goat grew very great, but when he became strong, the large horn was broken. And in place of it, four notable ones came up toward the four winds of heaven. And out of one of them came a little horn which grew exceedingly great toward the south, east, and toward the glorious land." We can find it in Daniel chapter 8, verse 8 and 9. There are clear indication in Hebrew grammar to suggest that in the phrase "out of one of them," the antecedent of them is the four winds of heaven. That being the case, the little horn must have originated from one of the quadrants of the compass. Second, the horn starts little but becomes exceedingly great. Antiochus was never such a great king. In spite of his attack on the Jews, he was subsequently defeated by the Romans and had to return home humiliated. Third, because of the recapitulation principle operative in the visions of Daniel, we know that the scene depicted in Daniel 8, verse 9 to 14, corresponds to the heavenly judgment scene of Daniel 7, verse 9 to 14. Therefore, the sanctuary attacked by the little horn must be the heavenly sanctuary, not the sanctuary in Jerusalem, as prophesied by many scholars or many commentators. And of course, he was not Antiochus the fourth, the little horn. Because Antiochus does not fit the specification of the little horn, the question emerges. Now we have another question. To what entity does the little horn refer? If it is not Antiochus the fourth, so who this little horn refers to? At this point, we keep in mind the parallelism between the prophetic vision of Daniel. Thus, the little horn of Daniel 8 must correspond to the little horn of Daniel 7. That being the case, Papal Rome emerges as the most obvious referent for the little horn of Daniel 8. However, there seems to be a subtle differences worth noticing between the horns of Daniel 7 and 8. The little horn of Daniel 7 emerges from the fourth beast, which indicates that the Papal Rome is the continuation or the extension of the imperial Rome. In contrast, the little horn of Daniel 8 apparently does not emerge from any beast, which may suggest that it represents two continuous phases of Roman oppression. First, the imperial Roman phase, the horizontal expansion, we can find it in Daniel 8 verse 9, and then the Papal Roman phase, the vertical expansion. We can find it in Daniel 8 verse 10 to 13. It is interesting to note that in Daniel 7, the little horn attempts to change God's law. In Daniel 8, it aims its attack at the prince of the sanctuary and at the foundation of the sanctuary itself. Such symbols indicate that the papal system puts in place a counterfeit of the plan of salvation. It attacks both the law of God and God's plan of salvation. Now, what about the Day of Atonement? In view of the aggressive activities of the little horn against the sanctuary and its ministry, the question emerges. Now, another question emerges. How long will the vision be concerning the daily and the transgression of desolation, the giving of both the sanctuary and the host to be trampled underfoot? This question presupposes that a long time will elapse before the sanctuary can be restored, because the word vision here refers to the vision of the ram and the goat, which extend from the time of the Persian Empire to the time of the evil action of the little horn. Before we consider the answer to this how long question, let us consider the sanctuary imaginary of Daniel 8 verse 9 to 14. Okay? This section of Daniel 8 is filled with sanctuary, imaginary, and terminology. Words such as host, prince, daily, and sanctuary evoke the Hebrew ritual system. Host, Sabbath, may designate the cultic personnel at service in the sanctuary. Prince, Sar, may designate the high priest. Daily, Tamid, is the word used to qualify some cultic activities of the sanctuary as happening continually, such as incense, sacrifices, etc. Okay? Note that the word sacrifice used in some Bible version does not occur in the original version. It has been supplied by translators who assume the prophecy refers to the suspension of the temple sacrifices by Antiochus IV. Indeed, the Hebrew refers to the suspension of the temple sacrifices by continuity or regularity and refers to the multiple activities of the sanctuary service, which include but not restricted only to sacrificial offering. Interestingly, one of the two words used here for sanctuary, which is Kodesh, occurs in Leviticus 16 in the context of Day of Atonement. Moreover, the parallel between the sanctuary scene and the heavenly judgment depicted in Daniel 7 verse 9 to 14 indicates that both visions portray the same event. Therefore, the sanctuary referred in Daniel 8 verse 14 must be located where it must be in heaven. Okay, now comes the answer to the question posed in Daniel 8 verse 13. How long will the vision be concerning the daily sacrifices and the transgression of desolation, giving of both the sanctuary and the host of the temple and the food? Daniel 8 verse 13. The answer is, for 2,300 days then the sanctuary shall be cleansed. Daniel 8 verse 14. This response from one of the heavenly beings informs us that the sanctuary, which is depicted as under attack, will be cleansed or purified after 2,300 years, applying the year-day principle. Such long timetables agree with the time frame presupposed by the question, which reaches back to the time of the Persian Ram. Although no information is given about when this period begins or ends, it is clear that it must start sometime during the Persian period. But the heavenly being clearly states that what will happen when this long period ends, namely the cleansing of the sanctuary. In the Israelite Celtic calendar, there was a special day assigned for the purification of the sanctuary, which is the Day of Atonement. On such occasion, the tabernacle was purified, or tahir, from the sins of God's people. Daniel 8 mentioned a time for the cleansing of the heavenly sanctuary. Such action is conveyed by the verb nitzdak, okay, which means to be restored, cleansed, and vindicated. So the main ideas conveyed by the verb are that 1. The sanctuary must be cleansed from the sins of God's people. 2. God's intercessory ministry in the heavenly sanctuary must be restored. 3. God must be vindicated from the profanation of his sanctuary. The papal system introduced distortion to the plan of salvation and usurped Christ's intercessory work by means of the sacrament of the Mass, the penance, and the absolution of sins by human priests. From the information given in Daniel 9, verse 23 to 27, we can determine that the year 457 BC marked the beginning of this prophetic period of 2,300 years. Therefore, the end of this prophetic period must be in 1844 AD. What happened in 1844 AD? It was on October 22nd, I guess, when William Millers and all his followers went somewhere in the desert in United States of America waiting for the second coming of Jesus, but it didn't happen. They expect Jesus to come on October 22nd, 1844, after waiting for hours and for perhaps one day. The second coming of Jesus didn't happen. And what finally? Ellen White finally found out that there was a horizontal move of Jesus somewhere in heaven, from the holy to the most holy place. Okay, the next overview of this number 9 lesson of our quarterly Sabbath school lesson will be shared, will be discussed later on. Thank you very much for spending time with me.